If you've got a smoke alarm upstairs and a fire starts downstairs while you're asleep, how long do you think it would take for you to actually hear it? See, a normal smoke alarm does a great job of detecting a fire in the room that it's in, but that doesn't help much if you're on the other side of a house. And that's the problem that Sensereo are looking to solve with these. This is the new MS-1 Interlink smoke alarm system, and the idea is pretty simple. If one alarm detects smoke, all of the alarms sound. And because they're using matter over thread, that communication happens locally and quickly. I've already been using Sensereo's smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms for a while, so I've got a pretty good idea of what the hardware is like. But this is the first time that I've been able to test this new interlinked system. And just so you know, Sensereo sent me this pack of two MS-1 Interlink smoke alarms and an MSC-1 Interlink alarm free of charge for review. But they don't have any control over what I say. So let's get into it. Hi, I'm James and I've been building out my smart home for years, with products from just about every manufacturer out there, figuring out what works and what doesn't. Now, if you've seen my previous videos on these alarms, the basic idea here will be pretty familiar. These are smart smoke alarms that use matter over thread, so they can be added to almost any smart home ecosystem. They also run on batteries, so there's no need to run power cables around your home. Annoyingly, there does still appear to be a difference in the way that these batteries work between the MS-1 and the MSC-1, where the MSC has replaceable batteries and the MS-1 doesn't. But the main difference with this new Interlink version is that the alarms can communicate directly with one another. So rather than thinking about these as three separate smoke alarms, you can think about them as one big system spread throughout your home. And that's particularly useful because smoke alarms are one of those things where location is really important. A standalone alarm in your kitchen might wake you up in a smaller home if there's a fire there. But if you're upstairs in a larger home with the bedroom door closed, you don't necessarily want to rely on that alarm being loud enough for you to hear it in time. But with Interlink, the alarm in the kitchen can trigger the alarms upstairs as well, alerting you much more quickly. Installation of these things is really straightforward. In the box you get the alarm itself, the mounting hardware, and everything you need to attach it to a ceiling or wall. And because they are battery powered, there's no wiring to deal with. And that's something that I actually quite liked about the original units, because it means that you can put these where they actually make the most sense rather than where you happen to have access to mains power. I've put mine in a few different places around my home so I can properly test the interlinking, including the original locations on my landing and in my lounge, and I've put the extra one all the way out in my garden gym. Since I recently discovered this loose connection in the electrical panel out there, which had probably been arcing away trying to burn the place down for the last 2 years. And I've put mine in these areas because that's where I actually want them, but also because I think it's going to give me the best real-world test of their range and their intended use cases. Now for me, the smart home side of things is still personally most interesting. Since these use matter over thread, you will need a compatible thread board or router on your network, or a thread dongle in Home Assistant. In my case, I'm using Home Assistant with a Sonoff Dongle Plus flashed with the thread firmware, and Apple Home as my secondary matter thread network. Now the pairing process is the usual matter setup that we've seen many times. Scan each code and it will appear in your chosen ecosystem, in my case Home Assistant, and then you can pair them to a subsystem as I've done here with Apple Home. And because the interlink communication is happening over thread as well, the alarms don't need your Wi-Fi network to talk to each other whatsoever. In fact, they don't even need an internet connection at all. But of course your smart home platform does if you want to receive notifications when you're away from home. And all this means that if your internet connection goes down at 3 o'clock in the morning, your smart linked smoke alarms don't suddenly become dumb ones. But obviously the most important thing here is whether the interlinking actually works. So I've now got 3 alarms installed around my home, and if I trigger an interlink test by pressing the button on one of them, all of the other alarms should sound as well. Like so. And that right there is the feature that really makes this stand out from the standard MS-1 smoke alarm. Any one alarm triggering means that you hear all of the alarms no matter where you are. You don't have to rely on hearing the one that's closest to the fire. And the other thing that I really like here is that it isn't dependent on Home Assistant being available. Home Assistant isn't sitting in the middle of this process telling one alarm to trigger the other. The alarms are communicating directly with each other locally over Thread. So even if your Home Assistant server is switched off, and even if your internet connection goes down, the interlink system itself is designed to work still. Now this is another somewhat interesting part of the setup process that Sensereo were eager to have demoed. Once the alarms have been paired, they say that you should leave them for around 5 minutes to allow their thread network to stabilize. Then you can run an interlink test with the alarms in their final positions. And the number of response cycles that they go through from the alarms gives you an indication of the thread connection quality. So up to 3 response cycles indicates a better connection, while fewer cycles can indicate that you've got a weaker connection. Now, I actually think that this is a really good idea because Thread can be a bit of a black box. If a device is technically connected, it can be difficult to know how good that connection really is. Having some indication from the alarm itself gives you another way of checking whether you've put these in sensible locations. And there's actually another smart feature that Sensereo called out in their documentation, which is the remote self-test. See, from here in Home Assistant, I can initiate that self-test, and the alarm carries out this test without me physically pressing any button on the device. And this is also actually super handy because sometimes these things don't get installed in the most accessible locations. And because smoke alarms are one of those things that you kind of set and forget, well, at least until the battery starts complaining, being able to run a test from Home Assistant gives you another way of checking that they're still responding without having to get up a ladder over the stairs and risking your life in a whole new way. And that's especially useful for people with disabilities too. And this is where I think the MS-1 Interlink just makes sense. A smart smoke alarm on its own is obviously useful and life-saving. You can get notifications, you can monitor its status, and you can integrate it with your smart home using automations. But the thing that matters the most about a smoke alarm is still the alarm. If you're asleep upstairs, the notification on your phone isn't particularly useful if it's not going to wake you up, or if the Home Assistant server has already been burnt to a crisp. So adding interlinking was a much more important addition than any other upgrade that Sensereo could have made. And especially since many countries are now making it a legal requirement for new alarm installs to support interlinking in some way, because it makes such a difference to people getting out of a fire in time. You can still make use of all the smart home functionality where it's useful for monitoring, testing and automation, but the critical safety function doesn't depend on your smart home at all. One alarm detects smoke and the others all respond, even if your Home Assistant server has already been melted by the blaze. There is, however, one rather annoying downside to this particular system, and that is that if you've already bought Sensereo's original MS-1 alarms, you can't simply upgrade them to Interlink, even by buying an Interlink system. Sensereo have confirmed that the Interlink functionality requires new hardware and the old models cannot simply join the new system. And since I already had Sensereo alarms installed around the house from my previous reviews, I've had to take those down and replace them with these new ones. And that's clearly not ideal, but easy enough for me since they do fit on the old mounts. Plus, if you're starting a new system from scratch, that's obviously not a big issue. And for me, the actual interlinking is a worthwhile addition because it addresses something that the original alarms couldn't. That making sure that an alarm in one part of the house guaranteeably lets you know throughout. But don't worry, my old alarms won't be going to waste though. One of the units that I removed may well end up being included in next month's giveaway. So if you are considering getting one of these, make sure that you're subscribed to my mid-tier channel membership or higher, because the odds of you winning one are still flip a coin good. So, is the MS-1 Interlink system worth it? I think the answer depends somewhat on whether you're looking at this as an upgrade or starting from scratch. If you've already got a house full of these alarms or some other system, the fact that you need this new hardware is definitely something to consider, especially with the extra cost. But if you're building a smart smoke alarm system from scratch, I think the Interlink is a much more compelling proposition than having a collection of standalone smoke alarms. You've got thread, Matter compatibility, totally wireless installation, local communication, and even remote self-testing. But most importantly, you've got the thing that the smoke alarm system should really be good at. If any alarm goes off, you will hear it anywhere in the house. And for something that's ultimately there to wake you up to save your life, that is exactly what you want. If you are thinking about purchasing this Interlink system, then the link to the product will be down in the description below and on my website as usual. And if you purchase one using my link, I will earn a small commission at no cost to you, so thanks for supporting the channel. And be sure to check out their website as soon as possible, because until the end of August, they've got a 10% early bird discount sale on the Interlink system. And if you've already got an interlinked smoke alarm in your home already, I would be interested to know how you've got them all set up, especially if they're integrated into Home Assistant, and if you've got any clever automations to go with them. And finally, before we go, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of my mid-tier or higher channel members whose names are on screen now. Your support really helps keep the channel going. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to see more videos like this. And as always, remember, home is where the smart is.